for coming along to talk about the ZX Spectrum. And as I say, I hope you're enjoying everything Play Blackpool's got to offer, all the machines, all the old happy memories, our trader hall, all of our tournaments and things, if that's your thing as well. I'm so pleased we've got so many great talks this weekend as well. Jim Bagley, who just came in the room, will be chatting with you over the course of the weekend as well. And I mentioned there'll be some football. We're doing sociable soccer tomorrow afternoon. Big launch of sociable soccer for the sensible soccer fans, and those of you who are sociable soccer fans and don't realise it yet. We'll be talking about that tomorrow. We're doing the Pac-Man Masterclass tomorrow as well with one of, I think, only 7 people in the world who has the perfect game. John Stoodley, who, if you've been coming to replay events a lot, you'll have seen him. He's the guy always playing Pac-Man. Because that's what he does, trying to get the Pac-Man record. And last year, he got it at one of the replay events. It takes about 7 hours to do the perfect game, and he will tell you how. It's not a real-time talk. There won't be 7 hours. But we were telling you how do you play Pac-Man for that long and get the perfect game, and how do you get better at Pac-Man? We'll be telling you that tomorrow afternoon. And we've also got a Sonic Masterclass this afternoon as well. Everybody is aspiring game character designers or artists. We'll be talking with Duncan Goodrich, who drew Sonic. And he'll be telling us how to draw Sonic and make characters, and we'll be doing that this afternoon at 3. And before all of that, you are here. We're all just in love with the ZX Spectrum, right? Or there better not be any Commodore owners in the room who are here just to tell us we were wrong. We all know those people. And you're welcome, Commodore owners, to learn why we were right all along in this talk. I'm so pleased that our first talk of this weekend is all about the ZX Spectrum. Something I'm very happy about. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please put your hands together for our very special guest starting our talks here at Play Blackpool, Henrique Olifiers. So glad you're joining us, Henrique. I'm going to start this, not with you, though, if you don't mind. I'm going to start this with all of you. Can we get some hands in the air and just a bit of a love-in, really? Let's find out who are our ZX Spectrum 48K rubber key owners. Where are you? Yes! Yay! Who's still got one that works? Oh, good. I've shamelessly put my hand down at that point. It's worn out. What can you do? Well, you can get new ones. What about, let's see, Plus? Who had the Plus? The reason I don't have my 48K rubber key anymore is actually because Dixon's lost it in the 80s and gave me a Plus to replace it with, which I felt really pleased about and at the same time really sad about. It's like, oh, a new version. It's just not the same though. Plus what else? A shout out for me. What have you got, ladies and gentlemen? What ZX Spectrums are kicking around in your houses?
128.
A 128? Yeah.
The heatsink one.
The heatsink one. Okay, what else have we got? Somebody? +2. A +2? Yeah, +2 owners. A few of us have +2s. Yeah, there we go. I can't remember all the different. Yes, Chris as well. What?
Auric Atmos.
An Auric Atmos.
Does that count?
Ooh. A what?
+3.
A +3. Oh yes. Yes, of course. They kept going to 3s. Anyone got a +4? I do. Anybody playing Spectrum games on emulators now? Yes? Speculator, yeah, and your Specky t-shirt as well, well played, sir. Speculator and other emulators, and oh, here we are, this is how to spend the weekend. Henrique, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Go on, let's get it right in there off the bat, and let's divide the room. Favourite Spectrum game?
Oh, that's a good one. Favorite special game. I will be torn between Quasatron and Cybernoid. Quasatron was because Paradroid died, right? Who doesn't like that game? The gameplay is so cool. And Cybernoid, it was a truly arcade game, right?
Yeah.
It had a very high frame rate and set the bar for many games to come. And it still looks incredible on the screen with all the effects.
Yeah, yeah. And the keys for the different weapons, it all worked really well. It was just so accessible. It was a game that I got particularly far in. I really enjoyed Cybernoid. And the sequel was good too. Yes, good. We're getting nods for the sequel. That's not something we say very often, is it? In gaming conventions and film conventions and stuff. The sequel, yeah, that wasn't a waste of time. So why did you fall in love? That's what we're talking about here, the love for the ZX Spectrum. Why did you fall in love with the ZX Spectrum?
Well, I think it, like everybody here, right? Back in early 80s, I got under the Christmas tree in bars. But as you can tell by my accent, I'm Brazilian.
Can everyone hear okay, by the way? We'll just make sure the mics are all right in this room. Yeah, just coming and going, aren't they?
Hello?
Henrique,
Hello?
use mine.
Okay.
Andrew also.
Can you hear me now? Yeah? Good, okay. So, early 80s, I got one under the tree for Christmas after bothering my father for I don't know how many months before I got one. But as you can tell by my accent, I'm Brazilian. So what I got was this. This was the clone, unofficial clone of the Spectrum
I'll bring this
that
round.
got launched in Brazil, called it the TK90X.
We are starting a talk on the ZX Spectrum with not a ZX Spectrum.
But for all purposes and intentions, it is a Spectrum. It's slightly modified ROM, so it plays probably 95% of the games, but you still have that wonderful rubber keyboard that everybody falls in love with. And it's one piece of hardware, it's one box, it's one thing that sits on top of your tiny desk with a tape recorder, and that's all that you need to have fun for years on end and start creating your own games and challenge the limitations of the hardware, thinking that you can do better than the games that you have access to.
A few people want to make you an offer for this, Henrique. I'll tell you that right now. A few people don't want to make you an offer for this.
That is the real one. That's what
This still works.
It still works.
This is yours. This is how you started.
My very first machine is 30-something years now, but it still works. So
It's very
I can
nice.
get anyone who wants one. I can get one like this, but not this one, I'm afraid.
Oh, well, there you go for your museum. There you go. We'll get talking to you afterwards. Really? How would you do that? They're just kicking around in Brazil?
Yeah, they are. They are. It's popular in Brazil on auction websites.
Okay.
As a Spectrum is, right? It's
Right.
It's not a rarity at all there. And they have the Plus as well. It doesn't look like the Plus at all. It looks like it's more like a typewriter machine with the chunky C64 style of keys.
This, you sent me your presentation deck during the week, and I saw this and I was like, oh, this is going to be a good weekend. I'm happy about this. There we go. That's what started things for me, certainly. For many of us in the room, I suspect, hands in the air. Who started everything, gaming, computing, all of it, with one of these? Yeah, decent chunk of us as well. And you with your knockoff one.
Thank you.
I loved it so much. I spent far too long not making friends because I had one of these things. I'm sure we could do a different talk at a different convention, which would be like, why the ZX Spectrum was bad for everyone of my generation. This is gone again.
And then you have this one as well. But they are both beautiful pieces of design. Even the toast rack is one of my favorites with that.
The toast rack.
Yeah, the heat sink on the right. I love all of them.
It's so different though, and I know you know something. You've been working with Rick Dickinson.
Yeah.
We'll talk about why towards the end of this talk. Do you know anything about why they were so different in design? Completely different design. Tell us about that. The 48K and the rubber keys, and then moving to this. Do you know what
inherited the keys from the QL. This design was inherited from the QL, right? The QL was meant to be more of a business machine, and the rubber key was deemed the bandwidth that you got input texting on the keys. Okay. The rubber key was deemed not sufficient for business.
Yeah.
So Rick created the QL design, and luckily enough, the Plus inherited those keys. It has to do with how much information you can put into the computer per minute.
Okay.
It's really that simple.
I suppose actually that question is kind of the wrong way around. Rather than thinking how do we get from a rubber keyed spectrum to one of these, this is far more similar. Suppose that.
10 seconds.
You got another one? No. There we go. And on. There we go. Actually, yeah, the question is more, isn't it? Why did we start with a rubber keyed spectrum? Who thought of that? Because everything else looked like this, didn't it? It had buttons which were, made out of that modern technology plastic. And we had a rubber key.
Cost.
It was
cost.
Cost.
Yeah. Sinclair was keen to keep it as cheap as possible, and one membrane was much cheaper than ABS's all these mechanic keys and having springs on them and all that.
But the design changed not just in the sort of physical materials and stuff, but on the rubber keyed one, everything was all these coloured words all over it.
Yeah.
And then that didn't travel forward on any of the sort of future models.
It's a shame, isn't it? Because those colours are much better indicators than these.
Even the colours themselves that are written on the number keys at the top, they're not in colours. I find it's very much, it's more of a business machine, isn't it? Even though it's a games machine.
It is, you're right, it is.
Businessy. But still something I'm sure many people are very, very affectionate about in here. So let's go from the top.
Okay.
Henrique, you've been around with the ZX Spectrum for a long time. Why do you love it so? I know where you got your first one from and what it looks like, but why do you love it so?
For me, it was a very known quantity, right? The machine, you knew the boundaries of the machine. And every time you loaded a new game made by a genius, usually from the UK, it will blow away your limits, and it will show you that everything that you knew and take for granted was bonkers. They could do much more than that. They could push the hardware. That is something that we have lost today, with there's so much technology around us that we cannot appreciate how much effort goes into something that is special, because those boundaries are not defined anymore. And every time I saw, like when the first time, some of the games that I put here, when you see Ant Attack was probably the first time I saw an isometric game. For most people, that was the first time we saw an isometric game, and that came to dictate how many games afterwards came to look like. Or Manic Miner, that was the first time I heard music in-game, right? Matthew Smith managed somehow to do that, and with interrupts to the gameplay and so on. Same thing with Jetpack. It was so high, the frame rate of the gameplay, that showed that machine didn't have to be frame by frame, it could be fluid experience. Nightlore with the Filmation, it brought a whole new quality level for every other machine around at that time, not just the Spectrum. People looked at that and say, oh my God, how can we make this in our machines? And then the Commodore started to catch up with isometric as well. And even things like we take for granted, like the Metrovania style of game, you could find it rooted back in things like Starquake. And when you talk about GTA, open worlds, and being able to go whatever the hell I want to do, whatever I want in my own terms, you can go back to Lords of Midnight doing that 20, 25 years before it did, right? So many of these things, so many of these language that we use today in games and that games employ to make everybody here have a great fun when they're playing them, were defined by these machines, the people coding on the Spectrum. This is why I fell in love with it. It's twofold. It's a machine that never stopped giving you surprises, and with every surprise, it teaches you that it's the same machine, but you can do better, right?
And was it easy to get hold of games when you were a kid on your knockoff Spectrum?
As you can imagine, the games were knocked off as well, right?
Okay.
Yeah. But there weren't that many, so and that's what pushed me to become a developer, right? Like when I exhausted probably the half a dozen games I had access to, I started to make my own games. And I was grateful to do that, because it was out of necessity that I became a programmer, not because I always had this dream of making games.
Okay. Also, what originally did you want to do? Did you know?
Just play. Yeah, the Spectrum was an upgrade for the Atari 2600 for me. I could do more with it, and it was a good excuse. It's for education, right? I could do my homework on my computer, that kind of stuff that a lot of people probably use as an argument to convince their parents to get them a first computer. So
I don't think I ever convinced my mum and dad there was any homework I could actually do at my school age on a ZX Spectrum, but that was a long time ago. Yeah. Did anybody ever pass that off? It's a homework tool? Yes, one hand. Worthy of a round of applause, I feel. Well played, you. There we go.
I'm not alone, thank you.
Now, of course, but a lot of these games, not all the games you mentioned, some of the games you mentioned, some of the games we're looking at, they were on other platforms as well.
Some of them, yes, but not all of them. For instance, Jetpack, I think, is an exclusive. Manic Miners, no, it was ported afterwards. Yeah, it was by I forgot his name now. The ex-Sony guy who worked with all the indies. Oh my God, he's a good friend. I'm terrible with names. Sorry.
But he's a good friend of yours.
I'm terrible with names, I'm afraid. It's one thing that But they were the first ones that I got in touch with, right? And some of the games were exclusive. You see, exclusive. I don't think Thanatos went. Somehow he went. He was back in the day, so it's probably.
Okay, plus was.
Matthew Smith did the original one, yeah, but who ported to Commodore 64 wasn't him.
Oh, sorry.
You're Googling, aren't you? Please do. No, sorry. Okay, so you started developing games. Did you send some stuff off to software houses? Were there Brazilian publishers?
No, I sold it myself.
Okay.
I sold it myself first to my friends, and then I started to do mail orders. So I will put ad in magazines, and I will copy them myself on tape decks, and then I will mail order them to people in Brazil. That was my first company, probably 13, 14 years ago.
So how many games were you turning out? How many copies of things?
I will probably turn out around 1,000, 2,000 copies in a year. It paid.
And how old were you, if you don't mind my
I
asking?
think 13.
13.
Yes, but by the time I started selling them, probably 13.
You were at home copying sort of 3 or 4 a day
Yeah.
to fulfill your business orders a year.
Yeah, and I knew we had tape decks. You didn't have to copy them through the machine, right?
Yeah.
You just use multiple tape decks and copy them all. You could use things like OmniCopy. You load on the RAM, then you dump down the back of the machine. But the right way to do was just that, right? And I had a friend who would pack them with me, and we would make order.
Did you make little cases and covers for them?
Yeah. We printed. It's black and white, but hey,
Yeah.
there you go. Right?
Wow.
And it still continues to this day. Some people still continue to code on the Spectrum. The passion that it brings is so powerful that it brings along. I brought a few games that I wanted to show. All these games are probably 5 years old at most.
So this may be a surprise. And as much as I love the ZX Spectrum, I honestly was not aware how much is still going on. And I'm sure that some people in the room will join me on that as well. So you say none of these games that we're looking at here are more than 5 years old?
No, unless I make a mistake.
Which is good, because on the last screen, I think most of us in the room were doing a little bingo in our minds, saying, oh, I reckon I can name most of them, and that one's bugging me, because I can't think what that is. These, though, if you've been looking at them and thinking, oh, they're not that familiar.
No, they're all new games. Some of them are made in Russia, which still keeps pumping out both the hardware and software on a regular basis. But some of them are British, and I think I have a slide here about the game jam that I will get into later on. But there's no stopping the Spectrum. If today you start to scavenge around the web what has been done in here, Spain, and Russia, you're probably going to find more software that you can have time to play with. And come on, that's 30-something years around, right? And it's still pumping out good games. Some of these games are amazing to play. And my favorite from here is Dreamwalker over there. Has a very key, unique game mechanic in there. You teleport with the other player. You control 2 players at the same time. They are a mirror of each other. You swap places with them. Such a refreshing game mechanic that you don't see in other games.
It would be fair to assume that there's something still going on in the development scene on the Commodore and other old similar era machines as well. This isn't just exclusive to the Spectrum, but there's a lot of love still out there for the Spectrum, and a lot of this is still going on.
Yes, for the other machines still go on, especially the Commodore. They have a lot of love from printing the cartridges, right? And even companies still sell them. But there's something about, I may be wrong, but I don't see the same kind of game jams and all that going on for the Commodore yet. At least I haven't seen in the past few years. They have competitions, though. They have comps.
They have competitions?
They have competitions, yes. But it's, in the end, it's the same thing, right? Game jams and competitions are very similar in that regard. But there's something about going with the Spectrum which is unique. Especially, I didn't know this, but the demo scene on the Spectrum is amazing as well, right? All these lists here is from February to March, so is a lot going on still.
This year as well, if you can't tell about. That's February 2016, and the rest of it is March 2016. So what we're looking at here is, these are demos.
These are demos submitted in the past 2 months. Yeah.
Submitted to a site.
Poet.net is the site for demos in the world, right? Any demo for Spectrum, Commodore, any machine you can find in there. Now, the Spectrum was never a demo scene as strong as the Commodore or the Amiga, right? Don't get me wrong. But you see it flourishing to this day, especially on they call the enhanced Spectrum, which is the hardware that is made in Russia that has far more capabilities. So they have 2 classifications. When you are complex competitions and so on. There are 2.
Hang on, use this one, Henrique, we'll get this fixed.
Thank you. Sorry for the technical problems. So there are 2 main categories when you're doing demo scene the competition. I think I love this as well. Hello. Anyone has a gun? I'll hold that here. So the vanilla Spectrum, right, which could be 48 or 128K, and you have what they call the enhanced, which has the memory doesn't have racing conditions with the EULA, which means that it's free to access at any time, and that gives it much more performance. But they also have modes and that the CPU operates at twice and even 4 times the regular speed, and then you have 512K of RAM. And so those demos become very, very much almost like Amiga quality kind of thing.
Does it feel like it's not a Spectrum anymore.
There is a good discussion going on all the time in these forums about if it's real Spectrum or is not real Spectrum, right? And that's beyond the point. What is happening there is that the Spectrum is being kept alive. That's what matters, right? These people are still coding in machine code for the Z80 and dealing with color clash. How beautiful is that? This is the landmark of the Spectrum, is the color clash and the palette that is so iconic as well.
I guess that's something true of sort of all of the retro, and particularly the emulation sort of world. You know, there's stuff being done in emulation which is because that's true to how it should be done. You know, we could have emulators that are much easier to code for, and could run at faster speeds, and we could be emulating, you know, sort of more recent consoles on PCs and so on. But the emulator community wants to make sure it's running exactly as it used to be and not take any shortcuts and not think, well, if we code it like this, that's a bit more efficient. If that's not how it was done, then that's not how we're going to emulate it. Yeah. So there's an honesty and a purity to that we want to keep things as they were, which is great.
For the craft, they consider that to be an art, right? They making the emulator as realistic as possible is the end goal. But you also get games that only work in such conditions. A typical one is called Aquaplane, where they use a timing on the border to use the border as an extension of the playfield. So you have the border in two colors, it's cyan on the top and green on the bottom, or something like that. But when it actually feels like the whole screen is being used, and you can only do that if the timing of the processors, all the hardware is emulated down to the millisecond. If there is one cycle lost, that effect changes position. Another game that you cannot play if the emulator is not 100% is Arkanoid. They use so many tricks on messing with the Z80 and the EULA, which is the graphics processing. Well, it's basically the Spectrum is mostly the EULA, right? And most of the hardware is within that chip. So anything wrong breaks that game. So it's a practical as well. You need that.
So these are demos. And looking at these, like this feels familiar. It feels like Spectrum images, and yet then I look at them and think, well, there's no way, you know, we had stuff that detailed, or color clash being quite so localized as opposed to sort of widely spread, if at all, in some of them. So this is amazing things, and you're saying that so jams and things are still going ahead, and there's a lot of development going on in Russia with hardware and software.
And you see even mainstream media covering it still, right? The Guardian talking about it and directing people to create their games. And when you're saying that some of those demos look like there's no color clash, that's very much it. People found a way to cram more colors without any hardware change or anything like that.
On original hardware?
On the original hardware, yes.
How did they miss that
it's
so
timing.
Long?
They use a special timing when the EULA is halfway through the scan line. They change the palette so it goes again. You still use the same memory amount and the same colors, but they're able to cram slightly more colors on lines.
Is anybody developing for Spectrum now? In the room? Any? Yes? Jim? Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
We'll talk about a little bit more of that in your career talk that we're doing later in the weekend then, I guess. But are you familiar with a lot of what's going on in this community as well?
Yeah, I've seen some of the stuff, yeah. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is an engine called Nirvana engine for the Spectrum that is very easy to use, that enable you to do those kind of tricks with the colors from the box.
I kind of don't want all the old colour clash to be replaced though. Am I the only one in that? Oh, that felt like part of the Spectrum, and that's what we got ribbed for, wasn't it, Speccy owners? Commodore owners in the playground would be saying, oh, you got colour flash, we don't have it as bad as you do, and so on and so on. I like it in a way, it's part of my memories of the Spectrum.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Now, you're from Brazil, and you got your Spectrum in Brazil and so on. Did you have those arguments? Is that a global thing? Was the Spectrum always having to fight its corner everywhere?
Yeah. In Brazil, it was not with the Commodore. We never had a Commodore in Brazil. But we have the MSX, the Japanese from Mexico, right? Which, one of the ironies of it is that most of the games you will find on the Spectrum were actually ports on the MSX, were ports from the Spectrum. They look play exactly the same. But when you got a native game on the MSX, they tend to look slightly better because it could deal with sprites and have more colors per sprite, so they could do a better job. But there was those arguments of we poking fun at the MSX users that most of the games they like were actually Spectrum games, not MSX games at all.
Okay. So that's a game jam. People still doing game jams now about Spectrum.
Still are, yeah.
And development carries on.
Yes, both in software and hardware.
Yeah. So we've got people may like to come up and see what we've got at the end. But yeah, let's show you this.
What's going on the scene. People who love the Spectrum probably have to grasp with one of these now and then, right? For this one in the middle, the AI Magic is for audio, but then you have the one piece on the top. They even give you network capabilities.
Yeah, just take us through this. Sort of go clockwise through them while we're looking at it.
Right, okay, so there on the top left you got the Nedo PC or Spectrum Evolution, which is the top end board anyone can get. It's a Russian computer, right? It has 4 megs of RAM and it can go to 28 megahertz and so on. That is what is the top end.
Come on! 4 megs of RAM.
And that's if you ever heard about TS config, that's what it's about. It is a mode that machine has that enable you to have, I think, 256,000 colors and so on. So it becomes almost an Amiga grade machine. It's also just 16 bits if you switch that config off. And that's what people say it's not a Spectrum, right? So, but if you take that config off, it's pretty much a Spectrum. So there you have the DV IDE on the right there with a memory card, which is basically replacing, it's a hard drive, right? But instead of being spinning a disk, it's a memory card. Same down here, but here it's a little bit, they have a USB keyboard and a mouse, a capstone mouse attached to it as well. Because some, especially Russian applications use mouse now as an input. You have the Div MMC on the top, they use SD cards. It's very similar to the other one, use SD cards. That one is the 1bis, which is the major function for it is network. Right? You can,
for local play or internet or
everything. It gives you an IP. You can tweet. There is a Twitter application for it and everything. So
you can tweet from it.
You can tweet from it. Yeah.
Of course you can. Wow,
because why not? Right. Then the others are variants and capstone dual joysticks and so on. But if you want a good machine today, you have to grasp with some of these things and
you have to import bits and then choose the capabilities you want and plug it all together. And
And then there are the other trend, which is people who are making rebooting the machine, right? The Spectrum Evolution, which I mentioned, but this one is very interesting from Spain, called ZX Uno. Emulates the Spectrum perfectly, but also emulates some other computers like the Scorpion, etc. And it brings up the ULA Plus, which is the Vega also has it. It's an evolution of the original ULA chip that enable you to have slightly more colors. Not the color clash. Color clash is still there, but you have more colors on top.
More colors to clash with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you get the missing link, which is the orange and so on, right?
Okay.
You can get with that. And then what's beautiful about the ULA Plus is that people are recoloring some of the original games. So you can have Terra Crescent and Cybernoid 2 and Dandari and all those games with new palettes. It's quite...
Skin tones.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite interesting to see. So those palettes are available for download. You load them before, then load the game, and the game look slightly different. And this is a friend of mine that created the TV Blue in Brazil, which is very similar to the Uno, but it has slightly more features. It has output for VGA and RGB. It has a scan doubler. The one also has a scan doubler, but I don't think it has all the features that the TV Blue has. In particular, the TV Blue was made with the same dimensions of the original Spectrum, so you could replace your board and put the TV Blue in, just cutting a small port at the back, and it has a DB9 joystick engine, so you can use the original joysticks with it. Right?
Oh, great.
So it's kind of everything that you will love on a Spectrum with a SD card, so you can open your Spectrum, put it inside, and it's neatly housed in there. So that's the difference. You don't need a special kit.
And leave your little tape deck and your tiny screwdriver that you needed for the head.
Yeah.
Sadly remains in your loft while the rest of this is getting some playtime. Okay, so this is a bit of a surprise that so much, well, a surprise perhaps some of us, certainly to me, that so much was going on in other countries. So much is going on now as well, and you're very much still involved in all this. People may not realise, you're developing now. You don't just develop on Spectrum, you've worked on a lot of recent, well-known games, such as...
Surgeon Simulator, I Am Bread, and so on. I am a co-founder of a studio in London called Bossa Studios, where we made some games that got some traction.
Yeah, I Am Bread, Surgeon Simulator. Some people in the room have played these and got these, I'm sure. I'm seeing some good nods for this. And they are... well, I was going to say notorious. That's not fair, but you know they're well-known games because they are unusual and with Surgeon Simulator pretty graphic, but on a lot of platforms as well. And then I Am Bread is if you haven't played I Am Bread, well, no, you tell the story of I Am Bread.
It's basically a slice of bread wants to become toast.
You are bread and you want to be toast.
Yeah, and
that's what the game is.
In the same vein of Surgeon Simulator, is probably one of the hardest games there is under the sun to control, because how do you control a piece of bread? You have to control each one of the four corners of it and make it tumble around until it gets to the destination.
Until it dies or changes. I'm not sure how bread would feel. When let's ask you the philosophical question here. When the bread becomes toast.
Well, when it gets into the... Well, that's
yeah, well, when it does become toast, is it still bread? It's going a bit zen now.
It's a fulfillment of a dream, right? Everybody wants it.
So all bread wants to be toast?
Of course.
No bread is happy just being bread?
No.
Did you investigate this for long?
Yeah.
Where does an idea like I Am Bread come from?
Game jams. All our
there you go.
are game jams.
Okay, so you would attend game jams and these ideas would kick around?
We attend game jams, or we do game jams every single month. All 35 of us stop and jam. And then we come up with these crazy ideas. So.
And they turn into very well-selling games. I Am Bread is a year old?
Yeah, it's a
now?
year. 1 year, yeah.
Yeah, and I've seen it at big gaming expos that I've been working at. I Am Bread, and it's been on a big screen and so on. But you still code for the Spectrum as well?
I do code, and especially I'm passionate about the hardware, right? I like tinkering with the hardware and expanding my Spectrum and owning all those boards and seeing what they can do and so on.
Do you, as a developer, name some of the platforms that Surgeon Simulator and I Am Bread on? They're on basically everything which is around now, including mobile. You can get Surgeon Simulator on mobile.
Everything, PlayStation.
Yeah, all the sort of ones you would name now that are current. Is it the developing for modern systems that make you wish you could do more with an old Spectrum? Is that kind of a circular thing? Do you write new games on new platforms and then think, oh, but I wish I could get it working on this over here that I love so much?
Again, I think the beauty of working with the Spectrum is knowing where the limits lie, right? I'm not dealing with the limits of the engine I'm using. I'm dealing with the limits of hardware in front of me. So anyone who knows to code the Spectrum or knows the game that runs on them, when they see something you made on the Spectrum, they can judge if you are good or not, if that is actually something that contributes to the scene or not.
Because we've seen so much from it.
Yeah, and we know
that
when someone makes something that shouldn't be possible, like cramming more colors on the screen, right?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff, when you find that, or when you do something that's very optimized and plays very well, people pay attention and learn from what you have done. This community is very open source, thankfully, and then you feel like you're progressing that machine. Now, on the other end, when we work with PlayStations and PCs and so on, the hardware evolves much faster than you can evolve as a coder, as a designer, and so on. It's very easy for you to max out any machine, right? You just do poor coding or just don't do your job well. But for you to max out those machines is not really possible, because they advance faster than your capability to max them out. And this is why I feel it's a little bit lost.
That's very interesting.
I never discussed about this before. I hope I'm not making something stupid here. The people will prove me wrong.
Well, so I guess with a platform which has been around so long like Spectrum, yeah, we would think we've seen the best of it. And when somebody goes, oh, I've found some colours, and by the way, colour clash, yeah, solved it. That's going to be huge. You're going to go, what? We've had this for so long, and it's like you've invented colour television, and all we've been watching is black and white.
Yeah.
Whereas with modern platforms, like PS4 and Xbox One and so on, yeah, we're nowhere near scratching the potential of those. Whereas people, developers I know, will talk about the previous generation, PS3 and so on, and go, it was only like in the real last couple of years we've really pushed that.
Yeah, and if you're stuck with the PlayStation 3 for another 10 years, you will still see things coming out that you did not think it were possible on the machine, right? This is why the best games come out towards the end of a generation, because people are very used to the hardware, they can use better tricks.
Yeah.
It's a toolbox, isn't it? Once you learn how things work, you start to accumulate those toolboxes, and then you look at a game and say, how the hell can I cram all these ideas into that? My toolbox is here. I know how to avoid color clash, or I know how to make the processor give all that it takes, and all the cores will work in this way because we are using that routine that somebody else developed. So you can do much better.
So we've talked about how you first got into Spectrum coding, and how it's progressing and what's still happening now, which is a thrilling thing to know that it's still there. And like I have emulators kicking around, and I sort of download Speculator or so on, and I think, oh, why am I actually going to play on it? Because there's so many games, and what am I going to remember? Because I had hundreds and hundreds of them, but what ones am I actually going to use? So this is great to know that there's loads of new things, and it might make us all want to dig out our old Speccies. And coming along things like these replay events as well, always makes me want to go home and raid the loft and get all my gear back down again, because unfortunately it just can't live downstairs. Although that might change. But things can get a bit easier with something you're working on as well. So I think it's time we maybe announced where you've been working hard on. This is a new announcement that hasn't been done anywhere else at all. So you're the very first people to hear this.
So I pair with these fine chaps over here. The first one you all should know and be a fan of. That's Rick Dickinson, who created the first Spectrums, right? He worked at Sinclair, created ZX 80, 81, the Spectrum, Spectrum Plus, the Spectrum QL. And he's one of the best designers in the world. He understands design from a perspective of very few people. This is why the Spectrum is so iconic compared to all the computers that were its peers. And then a childhood friend of mine, this is the guy who helped me with the computers back in the days when we were making the games and shipping them. He became a hardware guy for retro computers, and most of the stuff he has been doing is cross-platform. If you ever heard of the cartridge emulators that go around for 2600, for the Odyssey, or for NES and so on, that's his creation. And Fabio is another guy who works with him, but he's much more of a MSX guy. But these two guys created the TV Blue, which I spoke about before. I have one here, actually going to work it, show it to work. But one of the things that none of these kids captured for me was that simplicity of the original one, that beauty of design, that one piece that does everything, that thing that you take out of the box and say, oh my God, this is beautiful. I don't need an iron, soldering iron, I don't need another expansion, nothing like that. It's like the original Spectrum, a slight, like, beautiful, elegant box that has everything inside it.
Yeah, it didn't need loads of connections, you didn't have to attach hundreds of things to it.
Exactly.
Turned it on and it just greeted you with that little blinking cursor. I was like, go on then.
Yeah, and then this is what I have been pushing these guys to do. Right? All that you're going to see here is their work, right? I'm only the one waving the flag and saying, let's do this, and they're the ones actually putting the hard work into it to make it happen. So it's the first time we are showing it.
No one has seen this before.
This is
groundbreaking stuff, and this is yours. So thank you for coming to this talk. You, in this room here at Play Blackpool, are the very first people to see this at all. This is the ZX Spectrum next.
Yeah. I'm going to show you later on the screen here, which is that there's some details that the projector are not making good work of, but essentially is everything that Spectrum was and still is in one package that has everything that is out there right now that people use for the Spectrum.
So we looked earlier on at a slide with lots of components, and we were talking about all the different things that you can get and attach to this. What you guys have been working on is consolidating it all and making it into a box that we love, that looks familiar, and can plug and go. Yeah,
and if we missed something that people are very particular about, say an expansion or something like that, we also made sure that you can still attach the old hardware to it and it should work. Right? So it should please everybody, or so I hope. Especially the people who complain that there's no HDMI, now this one has, right?
Color clash, yeah, big screens.
Big screens, yeah, why not, right? But we went as far as you have RGB, you have VGA, you can attach to CRTs or flat screens or anything, everything work. I have a couple more images here that show the kind of the care that Rick Dickinson went to get.
So remember, this is Rick Dickinson's work. He made the Spectrum.
But
he was the designer on the original one, the rubber keys one that we loved.
And you can see there, even the feet there is retractable like the Plus, but he made it like...
I'd completely forgotten those. Yes, yeah. yes, those retractable ones.
So you can get it inclined. Now the keyboard looks very much like the Plus, but is a re-implementation mechanically. But we are using butterfly mechanisms, very much like the ones you find in laptops.
Okay, so modern keyboard technology is more resilient and springier.
Yeah, and if you have a Plus, you'll see that sometimes it's very difficult to key on it, right? The keys sometimes stick together, they tend to get noisy. And that's the kind of the thing that we are not used to anymore. We do that for the old games, but if you actually want to use it intensively, you need a little bit more bandwidth in the keyboard, and Rick did that work as well. And we also have the same interface, the multi-phase 1 thing here. This is a button that evokes the multi-phase 1, so you can freeze the games, put infinite lives, all that stuff.
Thank God for the multi-phase. I'm not the only one who... Yeah, thank God for that piece of kit. I know that was a thing we plugged in, and for many of us that may have been the only extra thing we plugged into a Spectrum beyond, you know, tapes and so on. But good, I'm glad to see that's there.
Yeah. And
what else are we looking at on the ports? Just
so here you have a PS2 port for mouse or extra keyboard. You have, here is VGA or RGB. You select which one has a scan doubler, so you can use a Commodore 1088 monitor, or you can attach any CRT, like old VGAs there, or flat screens. Here, if you're really into loading from tapes, you can load and save from tapes. We kept them. We also have a DB9 here, which is an interface 1 and interface 2 joystick port. So all you have to do is to plug the joystick. You don't even need to buy a Capstone interface or anything like that. Here is the bus, where you connect any hardware that you have legacy. This is power, and this is HDMI.
Legacy hardware?
Yeah, any hardware that you own. Not any hardware. There is one that we found that doesn't work, and we haven't solved the problem yet. But everything else we have tested. We've tested a lot of stuff.
So if you haven't built a multi-phase in,
you can plug it in.
You can plug a multi-phase.
Yeah, you can load from the micro drives and everything. And here's the SD card, right, which you control. You store everything, and you have an SD card, div MMC compatible kind of interrupt, where you just go into the directory, select what you want with the keyboard, choose it, and it loads into memory immediately. And also supports XDOS, which is the Russian protocol, which allows you to do big files on disk. So you can capture, play MP3s and all that.
It's nice,
yeah,
isn't it? And you've kept the toast rack as well.
I have here the specs of the machine that anyone is interested, but I think that the best thing that we could do here is that these are the people who love the Spectrum probably more than I do. And I would really like, because this is just in prototype phase, we know that we can do it, we are securing it, but I wanted to hear from people what they would like, if they have ideas and so on, and questions about it, so we can incorporate that into it. Right?
Okay, so I think we'll move on to that bit. It's cool to see. So we've got 10-15 minutes for some questions. If anybody has any questions that you would like to ask Henrique about development or the Brazilian import scene and where we can get hold of Spectrums, or indeed we'll just go for the next, I think. But yeah, so let's find out. I'll try and use a roaming microphone. Not obviously this one, Andrew. I'll try and use one of your wireless ones if you think so. So yes, if anybody's got any questions, I'll come amongst you. And if anyone's got any questions for Henrique, then please fire away, whether it's about the next or any part of the tool that we've had. And yeah, also, what do we want? Let's find out. Let's have a go. Where's right, our first hand in the back. Hello, sir. What have you got?
You say that there's one peripheral that does not work. What is it?
Oh, and you were so elusive, Henrique.
It is a mouse interface. I think it's AMX, what it's called. And the thing is, that interface comes with its own Z80, right? So it was meant to not use the Spectrum Z80, but it was meant to use that one instead. It takes over the Spectrum. Using one, on the expansion board, there is one pin called the bus request, which is basically takes control of the Z80 and makes the Z80 on the Spectrum not work anymore. That is the one that we have not fixed yet, but I haven't given up on that.
Any more questions? Yes.
So, MGT, Miles Gordon Technology, sort of made a lot of the interface and stuff for the Spectrum back in the day. Did you think they were quite key in expanding the Spectrum with the multi-face and the microdrive?
And the SAM Coupe, right?
Sorry?
And the SAM Coupe. They made the SAM Coupe, yeah.
We talked about the SAM Coupe. Have you got any sort of comments on that or anything?
No.
Because that was the sort of supposed to be the next gen Spectrum, and it didn't do too well, did it?
No, it didn't, right? I think, if my memory serves me well, I remember reading it was to do with incompatibilities issues, right? Because the SAM Coupe was meant to replace the Spectrum and have 100% compatibility with your legacy games, and that didn't actually happen. and the other was that they could not meet demand. They delayed a lot the shipping of the units, and people gave up, and they requested refunds, and I think that what brought them down. I may be wrong, but I remember reading about this. Now, if you want something similar to the Sam Coupe, it is possible with the hardware here. Because it's all implemented in FPGA, is very expandable. We have room to do more with it. The Sam Coupe is actually comparable to the TS config that you find on the Russian ZX Evolution to some extent. But yeah, there's a lot of machines, there's a lot of expansions made by MGT that as many as we could test, we tested.
Any more questions or ideas that you want out of the next? Yes, I'll come to you first and I'll come back. Yes, also do think, if there's something you've tried, on an emulator, or you bought a Bluetooth Spectrum keyboard and you've played with an emulator on that and so on, what if you genuinely want to know, don't you, Henrique? What's missing from all of those options that you think we can implement with the next?
Maybe I'm missing the toast rack. Maybe we need something to keep our toast warm, right?
I was wondering, is this endorsed by Sinclair? Or?
It is. We have all the brands, right? We have the rights to use the ROMs and the Sinclair brands, etc. I have not approached Sinclair, Sir Clive yet, right? That's my next step. It's to ask what he thinks about it.
So like the Vega, was it the Vega?
Yes, the Vega is endorsed by him. He's actually, I think he's involved in the production of the Vega as well, which is very, very nice, right? This guy.
Excellent question. I'm glad you asked that. Is Rick Dickinson involved, as a designer, doesn't mean you can put Sinclair on it the way you have and have the keys and everything look exactly like it.
The brands for Sinclair at this time around, they were bought by Amstrad, right? And which in turn got bought by Sky. So that's what the brands rely on.
This may be a question someone's going to ask, but I will ask it now. You still want ideas for this next, and we're seeing those images and so on. So this isn't production, this isn't happening now, but when is it going to happen?
Well, we already have all the hardware. The hardware exists and is being already sold in Brazil as the board, right? Because we want a small group of people to test the limits and find things we couldn't find. I actually have an early prototype here. If we have time, I can show playing some games.
If you want prototype testers, I think I'm standing in a room with them. I think let's. Was there a hand over here for a question? Yes.
It's FPGA based, did you say? So all the hardware that's noted up there, that's all emulated in FPGA?
Yes, most of it is FPGA. The memories is the same memory that used on the Spectrum. Because of the timings, it's a special memory. And all the hardware is implemented at FPGA level. But there's no emulation going on. It's all reintegrated.
Any more questions? So I saw some more hands. Maybe they've been answered. Yes, oh, hello.
Interesting you chose the toast rack for the new version. Does this mean there's going to be iron bread on the latest?
I now have to port it, don't I? Yeah, that's a good idea. I will do that.
It should come installed as part of the design.
Yeah.
With a piece of bread. No, that would be a terrible idea. Don't put a piece of bread in it.
One of the elements I didn't speak about, perhaps that will invoke some questions, is what we call the accelerator slave board, right? This is a small board that we attach to it. That has direct access to the memory of the Spectrum, and the Spectrum has access to its memory. But it works as a slave to the Spectrum, which means that because we have a GPU and a high CPU there, we could, in theory, make it work for the Spectrum rendering OpenGL scenes. So we can have Quake on the Spectrum, right? The heavy OpenGL routines are running on that slave and then dumping it on the memory area of the Spectrum. The Spectrum is handling all the logic and the inputs, etc., and is displaying on the screen. So I don't know exactly what can be done with it because we're just starting to scratch the surface with it. But it is one of the things that keep me more excited. It's a very long road for the Spectrum using this. There's a lot that can be done that has never been done because of that extra bit there.
Jim. Yeah, here we go.
Any chance of getting hold of a prototype to develop on?
You knew that question was coming from somebody. It was just who was going to stick their neck out and ask. Henrique.
No, I will make sure that I get some prototypes. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Hands up from everybody. Let's have a show of hands from everyone. Who does play Spectrum games now on emulators or on original hardware if it's still working for you? Let's have it. I'm going to stand at the front so I can take this in. Yeah! Look at yourselves. Loads and loads and loads. A few going, no. why not those who aren't playing Spectrum games now? Is it just because the hardware's gone, or the keys have gone on it? Certainly they're gone on mine. Do you know where you can get rubber keys easily?
You can, yeah.
Yeah, I should get that done. But people who are still playing on them now, I asked you earlier on who's still got the hardware. Emulators, are we using emulators on phones and that kind of thing? Yeah, a few nods and Speculator you mentioned at the beginning, and other ones like that. I guess, would it be useful to you to know what would make people buy a hardware Spectrum now who haven't got one?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes, I would like to know that.
What would, without turning us into an enormous sales pitch, because that's not what I'm here for, but why, yes, go on.
Price.
Be price. Yeah, why would you have a ZX Spectrum Next rather than maybe a Bluetooth keyboard and your telly and an Android running Chromecast? At a stretch.
That's a good question. It has to be accessible, it has to be cheap, right?
Yeah.
The hardware itself is not the big thing. The hardware itself is very manageable and very easy to make. The hard thing is the casing and the keyboard. That's the expensive bit, right?
Because it's important that it's like the original.
Yes,
yeah.
And anything that you do in plastic and ABS, if some of you are familiar with the Kickstarter for the Amiga cases, right, they are remaking. The Commodore got the Kickstarter of Commodore 64 cases, but they were lucky enough to find the original molds in the US out of an auction. They bought the molds by the ton, so they paid probably like £1,000 and got that. But for you to craft a mold of ABS that's capable of printing the case, right? That is a very expensive exercise. It's usually in the realms of 50 or 60,000 pounds just to make the mold. Then you can start producing it, and then it becomes cheap. But you have that entry barrier of creating that thing.
So you're going to put a website together.
Yes,
you have that basically ready to go.
Just to get people's interest checked, and the people who want to do the website and sign up, I will start sending all these materials like the specs and all, and keep people posted on how the progress of the machine is coming together.
And you are the first ones to see that. That website is, I think, if it's not up now, it's going to be up very, very shortly.
Yeah,
but it wasn't up before we started doing this. So that ZX Spectrum Next is a new concept and a real thing, which there will be a Kickstarter for and going to happen with support.
Exactly.
So ladies and gentlemen, I hope that's an interesting reminder of why we love the ZX Spectrum so much, and reminders of some games that we should get hold of and emulate and then get playing on some hardware. I'm sure, Henrique, you'd be happy to chat with anybody who's got any more questions for you, whether it's about Bossa Studios or whether it's about Spectrum Days on. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please put your hands together for Henrique Olifiers. Now let's all just have a big hug, Spectrum fans.